Welcome back to the free game interview series. Extremely excited to talk with my brother, close friend, State Representative Kam Buckner. Before anything else, I want to thank him for taking time to speak with us. You know, especially now, you know, there's so many things, so many places that you need to be at. And, you know, I see you constantly uplifting the people and the citizens of Chicago. You know, the fact that you take time to still talk with me and work with me, I'm telling you, dude, I look at you on a daily basis and I'm proud beyond words can explain. And I think that your story, the reason for me starting the Brantley Method is to motivate, educate, and inspire. And I think that your story does all three across many different, I mean, we could literally talk about just one aspect and stay on topic forever and do those three things for a student from an educational standpoint, from an athletic standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. And for me, one of the things that I like to focus on and want to give more attention to that I don't think we're doing enough of as coaches and directors and mentors is life after the air goes out of the ball. And, you know, that to me is, you did great things. You played at University of Illinois. You know, the jersey's hanging in the background. You wore that eye proudly. But the work post-football, it has defined your life way more than who you were underneath that helmet. And I think that, especially for our young black brothers and sisters, they need to understand that athletics is a vehicle that can get you to that place, but you know your life doesn't end when you can't play anymore. So I think that's why for me it was a must. I had to get you on here to share your story a little bit and chop it up. So thanks for coming.
Thank you, Justin, man. Thank you for having me, and thank you for putting together this platform, because I think it's important that, you know, as we all go through our separate journeys, that we're able to share that with other folks, right? Often people keep whatever their story is, or whatever their path is, to themselves. And you know, as human beings, as vessels, we're not put here to do that. So having the platform and
Lost your audio, Kam. Can you hear me, Kam?
hear you now. We're good.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I lost your audio for a second. Last thing I heard, people sharing their stories and us being vessels.
Yeah, and that's what we're put here to do, is to be able to share with each other, and not to just hold our stuff to ourselves, man. So, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Hey, my man. So where I want to start at is you did something that a lot of people, I think it's almost like what we're trained, or you know, what we are taught by society is that we're supposed to grow and we're supposed to transcend where we're from. And you hear it all the time. Kids say, I want to get out the hood. I want to get out. I want to get out of my area. I want to, you know, I want to go to college because I've never been outside of my hometown, and I want to, you know, I'm tired of this place. I want to go away and never come back. I hear it all the time, and you accomplished so much, and you're back. You came back, and you're championing where you're from. Tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up in Chicago.
And you know, growing up in Chicago in the late '80s and early '90s was it really isn't what's the experience that has molded me into who, you know, I am as a person. It was I come from a family that was filled with love. That's you know, always very motivational and encouraging and inspiring. But also, both very in my home, and then, outside my home, there were a bunch of challenges. Challenges with substance abuse and addiction, challenges with violence, right? Being a young kid who perpetually on an annual basis was bearing friends and family members and cousins. All of that was very quickly etched into my psyche. But what also is true is that, this city, and anybody who knows me knows I have a tremendous affinity for Chicago. Right? This city really made me. And Chicago built me and taught me so much about life. Taught me so much about people. So growing up here in like I said, the late '80s and '90s, I really got a chance to understand socioeconomics and how that worked. I got a chance to understand civil rights and cultural affairs. A lot of the world is grasping on to the documentary that just went out, I guess 2 weeks ago about my Chicago Bulls, right? And like I lived it, right? And being able to really experience that in the most organic and real way, it painted a picture, man, for me. And everything from the sports to music to the food, all kind of put a little piece of the puzzle together and kind of created, I think, what I've become as a person. But Chicago is me, absolutely.
Yeah, and if you haven't had any heralds in your life, you haven't lived.
Let them know.
All right, man. So it shaped you, it molded you, it taught you a lot of lessons. How would you say? I mean, navigating through Chicago in the late '80s, early '90s. I mean, we're talking, Reaganomics. We're talking, the crack epidemic. We're talking, we could go on and on and on with what was taking place in Chicago, in Detroit, D.C., New York City. A lot of kids that come from those type of communities, we always talk about the glass ceiling, and we say, people, they're not able to break through that glass ceiling. And I look at it, I call it the concrete ceiling when you're coming from cities like that, because sometimes you can't even see what's on the other side of that. What would you say, number one, kind of what allowed you to transcend beyond, where a lot of your peers fell and didn't make it past that? And what role would you say youth athletics played in that?
I'll be cut and dry and very clear and concise. Athletics saved me. It saved my life, and it was the only reason that I saw anything more for myself than what I saw, outside the window of my parents' home. We didn't know many professionals, not many, especially not black male doctor, lawyers, those folks, the guys you saw in the neighborhood who either looked like they had money or dressed like they were, going somewhere, were either, preachers or dope dealers. All right. And it's like, pick one. Which one do you want to be? And, even in my neighborhood, there weren't a bunch of guys who had played, high school sports and went on to the next level at that point when I was growing up. But, there were a few guys that were just a little bit older than me that I watched, right? And they were they were athletes and they played everything and they were good at it. And they found a way to leave the neighborhood and leave, their situations and go and better themselves. And so as I watched them, it became very evident to me that that's the path, because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea what my passion was. I knew I was always passionate about people. I always was concerned with the next person and how to, I guess, comfort the afflicted. But I didn't know what that looked like in real life. So what athletics did for me, man, it gave me something to reach for, and it gave me, it gave me that drive and that discipline that I think I needed to better myself, because I was not a student who was interested in school. I wasn't very motivated. I had a bunch of huge difficulties when it came to, my education, but it was because I was uninspired, and the discipline was not there. But the things that I learned, on the football field, on the basketball court, on the soccer pitch, were all things that I was able to take and put together, and realize the life that I wanted to live. Number one, but also realize how to take that life and those skill sets and help other people.
No doubt. And you talk about, helping other people and that being who you were and a piece of your makeup. And I can testify to that because, and this, we talk about it all the time, but I'll never forget that day, almost 17 years ago, when I said, hey, you know what? I don't know if this is working for me. And I don't know if this is, University of Illinois is the place for me. And I tell my kids all the time as they're navigating through the recruiting process, it's about finding the right fit. And something can be perfect for one and just not the right situation for another. And you were the one, and I'll never forget that night. It was me, you, Big Chuck, and we sat back and we had that conversation. And you said to me, hey, look, man, you're my brother regardless. I'm gonna love you, I'm gonna support you, but you have to do what's best for you. And if it's not, you talk to me about just making sure that I was okay with whatever it was. It couldn't be about, I don't want to let the team down. It couldn't be about, I don't want to go home and look like a failure. It couldn't be about any of that. It had to be about, being the most authentic version of myself. And, it's funny looking back on that in retrospect and seeing the type of leader you were. We were the same age. It wasn't like you were, a senior talking to a freshman saying, hey man, this is something you need to do. We were the same age. We came in together and that's who you were. So that's why it doesn't surprise me the way that you're leading and motivating and, giving back. So that's something that is been a part of who you are from the day that I met you. Would you say that there was like one person that really instilled that in you from a coaching perspective, or from an older player that you looked up to, or is it just something that innately was a part of your personality and makeup?
Yeah, I think that probably my biggest mentor in that emanates from my participation in sports and athletics, man, was my high school football coach. And I say was, he's still with us, and he still is very, very pivotal in my life. His name is Lexi Spurlock, and Coach Spurlock, was a guy that grew up on the South Side of Chicago in the 1940s. He's around my parents' age, and then moved, kind of did a reverse migration, moved to Alabama when he was, I think, about 9 or 10 years old, and ended up playing football at Tuskegee, and coming back to Chicago post grad school to be a physical education teacher in the Chicago public school system. And it, he was so very in tune with people being in tune with themselves, right, and figuring out what is the thing that makes you you, and then investing into that, right? And I remember, as you said, when you were trying to figure out what you want to do, and there's always, especially for us athletes, right? There's always this little pesky voice in our head that's like, I can't do this or that because I'm a team player and I'm a teammate, and I'll be a bad teammate if I do X, Y, and Z. But I know, Justin, you're like me. You travel a lot, man. When you get on that plane, man, and they talk about the safety precautions, they say put your mask on first, right? Put your mask on first before you help others. And that's hard for a lot of us servant leaders, selfless folks, team players to do. But I think Coach Spurlock was he has taught me, he continues to guide me through that. On you can't help anyone else, you can't save anyone else if you're not being true to who you are, if you're not being true to your passion and being true to the things that make you you. And he told me a long time ago that you're always just one bold, radical move away from being the best version of yourself that you possibly can be. And so I keep that in my mind. I try to share that with others when they are contemplating large decisions or things that will have a long-lasting impact on their future.
Amen. And we all have one or two, right? And I've got a couple coaches and mentors, and I think that that's something that our community desperately needs. And we're going to touch on that in a minute. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that our community needs. But it's great to hear that you had Coach Spurlock and still have him. Still have that guidance and direction. One thing I'll say, athletics has given me an extended brotherhood. It doesn't matter if I played with a guy 30 years ago or 20 years ago or 5 years ago. The ability when I land in Chicago to come over to your house, and it was like we were we never stepped away, right? Like everybody came over, we're eating good, we're laughing, we're joking, we're having good conversation. And it's just it's natural. It's just something different. And it's you touched on it before. You said athletics saved your life. Without a doubt, it's done that for me. And I've seen it change lives, especially the lives of kids that look like us. And I think that not only finding something that you're passionate about, but finding the right people to lead and guide and motivate you is a key piece of the puzzle and a key piece of growth and development. And I think that I'm looking back on it, and almost every major milestone in my life, it has something to do with athletics, and not necessarily being, okay, it's all about athletics, but somebody I met through athletics, right? Like if it wasn't for football, I would have never met you. And I look at the relationship and the friendship, and I know that those are the things that I cherish the most about athletics and the most about my path and my journey. As you talked a little bit about not knowing what you want to do and not knowing what life was going to look like for you, but athletics kind of giving you that vehicle. As you got to University of Illinois, and obviously that first year, we both redshirted. 1-11. It was a tough year. Next year, 2-10. At what point? So two-part question. At what point, one, did you identify that what the NFL isn't really going to be that end of the day destination for me? I want to be a lawyer. Or I want to do more from that standpoint. That's number one. And number two, how did adversity help to shape and the adversity of losing on the field? Because I know you come from Morgan Park. Success is part of who you guys are and what you do. Talk to me a little bit about those two things. Number one, at what point did you discover, hey, I want to be a lawyer? And two, how did that adversity that you encountered while at University of Illinois help to shape and mold you into the man you are today?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I'll actually go back, so I answered two first, and then kind of segue into one. Um, I as you said, I came from a very prestigious high school tradition. I think we probably lost 4 or 5 games in my 4 years there.
Yeah.
We won the state championship every year that I played. We're just used to beating up on people, man. And so being the best person on the best team, it's a very humbling experience to come to college and realize that there are folks that are bigger and stronger and faster and smarter than you, right? And so you're no longer the best, right? You may have whatever the potential is, but skill set wise, you ain't the best. And then you look at what our record was. So, you know, reasonable person can say I went from being the best person on the best team to being one of the worst people on one of the worst teams, right? And that's quite a hell of a leap. And and understanding how to embrace that, I think, is important. And I tell you what, I learned more those first 2 years, especially that first year in Champaign, than I had learned in any of my 4 years at Morgan Park, right? And that has been a hallmark of my life since then. I've learned and gained so much more from failure than I have success, and it's something that forces you to dig inside of yourself and to figure out how you want to approach it, right? Because the thing, whatever the thing is, it's going to continue to be there. It's going to keep on happening unless you then therefore insert yourself into whatever that is. So it was like I said, it was an extremely humbling experience. And I'll say this: you made a point earlier about um, creating friendships and partnerships and lifelong bonds and brotherhood through sports. I can tell you, I think with complete confidence that if we played on an 11-1 team our freshman year, we would not be as close with the group of guys that came in with us, because something about adversity and it breeding loyalty, it breeding a familiarity with your brother, because when your back's against the wall and there's nobody there but the guy that's next to you, that creates those relationships. So I actually appreciate those times. I think they're important for my growth as a person. And then, as far as not knowing what I want to do and figuring out what that looked like, it's funny because I said earlier, I grew up in Chicago in the '90s, so obviously I was a huge basketball fan. Right? I was a huge Michael Jordan fan, and I thought I was going to the NBA. That was my goal, right? I was going to be a hooper, and at some point in life, I stopped doing this and started doing this, and when that happened, it became very clear to me that my path wasn't going to be basketball. And I had never played football until my freshman year in high school, and so I didn't watch it growing up as a kid. Even though I was born the year that the Bears last won the Super Bowl, so you always hear about football in Chicago, but it wasn't something that was part of our normal life in my house. We did a lot of basketball, and and my dad was a wrestling guy, and so did a lot of and not like the WWE wrestling, but like collegiate wrestling and martial arts, right? So I spent a lot of time doing judo and aikido and aiki, and just football wasn't a thing. So I never, and people think I'm crazy when I say this, I never loved the game, right? And I never had an affinity for the game. Some of my friends now who didn't play at a high level, they want to have long conversations about the game and schemes and all that. I'm like, I don't know. I don't care about that, man, right? I don't know anything about that, right? I put my hand in the dirt and they told me to go get the quarterback, and I did, and I was good at it. So I was like, all right, cool, I'm going to keep doing this. But I think I knew very early on that I wasn't, I didn't have these dreams of, playing out on the next level, and it wasn't something that was just pumping through my blood like that, man. So I wanted to find ways to use that as a platform. I wanted to find ways to use it as a vehicle, and wanted to find ways to help my people in whatever way possible. And so it became very clear to me early on that I wanted to go to law school, and I wanted to be a lawyer and find ways to use the law to be helpful. Growing up in the city as a kid, a lot of the things that I saw on a normal basis are very similar to what we see going on just today, right? Just last night, my district was burnt and looted and windows smashed, and many of the commercial corridors, because people are pissed about the way they've been treated by law enforcement and by society and by the system, right? And so that was the same thing that was occurring 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And so that is what pushed me to want to, go ahead on and go to law school. Initially, I wanted to be a teacher. My mom taught in the Chicago public school system for 36 years. And she's always been my personal role model, my best friend, like the person who I look at when it comes to public service, and my best example of what a good person is. And I wanted to be a teacher at first, and then I chickened out. And I was trying to figure out what my thing was, and that's how I ended up, in that space. But it became very clear to me, just to shortly answer your question, I know I'm going in circles, but it became very clear to me very early on that if you want to effectuate change, if you want to help people, in the history of our country, the best way to do that, and the way that has been done, is through legislation and through the law. And that's why I kind of, clamped onto politics and to the legal profession.
So let's stay there. And there were some things that I want to talk a little bit more about the educational path that you took. But I think that, where the climate of our country is at, you touched on a lot of key things. And one of the biggest things that I can say is, I see people and all of a sudden they're outraged, right? All of a sudden, they're upset, and they're speaking out, and that's fine. We need everybody to speak out. We need everybody to step up to the table. But for you, it's been your life's work. What you're saying now isn't just a speech or a spiel because of what's happening around us. You immediately after law school, you were a staffer in D.C. For Senator Durbin. You in post-Katrina New Orleans, you were there to help lower the violent crime and raise the quality of life. And now you're back and you're in Chicago, working for your people, working for the citizens that you grew up around, the 13-year-old Kams. You're trying to create legislation to make sure that their lives, their quality of life is better. And with that being said, I'm seeing everything happen, and I'm seeing, like you said, the same stuff that we were talking about back with Rodney King, the same stuff that we were talking about. We've been fighting for freedom in this country for over 200 years. For somebody, so for me, I find faith in knowing that there's people like you that are able to work on that legislation. They're able to be representative of what I need in this country, what my sons need in this country. But to the everyday person that doesn't know, doesn't know a state representative and doesn't know what they look like, right? And never doesn't know how legislation gets passed, doesn't know, all they have is their anger right now. All they have is, a lack of understanding. What do we say to those people to give them faith that at some point we're not going to sit here and say, hey, this same thing we were talking about 30 years from now, we're talking about it in 2050. At what point where do we find that faith? Where do we find that sense of change is going to come? Because I feel like this is the same thing. Martin Luther King was marching for peacefully, in his day, and those peaceful protests and those marches were met with violence and resistance. And we continue to see that, from your lens and your perspective. What can you tell the people that are watching, or the people just in general, that need some faith, need something to cling to?
So I think the most important thing, Justin, and thank you for the question because I think it's extremely pivotal. I think the most important thing is that we've got to realize whether you live in Chicago or Detroit or Baltimore or Newark or Miami or LA, that the people who are going to save these places are already there. The caravan is not coming. Nobody's coming with a cape on to right all the wrongs of the past and to fix what's broken about our society. All right. It is folks like your sons, folks like my nephews and my godsons, who have to be invested in, um, who have to be given the tools to fix their world. Right. You talked earlier in the first part of this about kids like us growing up, and being determined to leave our neighborhood, right, to get out the hood. Um, but we've got to create a situation where we are emboldening people to get out the hood, to go get the skill set they need, and come back and fix the hood, right? To make sure that they are um, they have a seat at the table and they're part of the conversation and they're shaping the narrative. I know enough people who are super smart and rock star leaders who don't really mess with politics or civic things, right? Because that they don't think that they have a place there. But we understand that the only way things get changed in this country, we can't change people's minds or their hearts, right? That's between them and their God. But what we can do is create a better atmosphere so that your young men don't have to deal with the same thing that we did, right? Or that my future daughter does not have to deal with the same situation that I do. So it's a sense of ownership that we have to highlight. This belongs to all of us, and we all have answers that can be effective in the larger scope of the problem. You know, we have to, though, like I said, empowering each other, invest in each other, and that's why I think number one, education is so important. Education does not just mean obviously school books, right? But it means the holistic piece of it, um, and that's why kind of pivoting back to some of the work that you do, you know, the athletics piece is huge because it's also educating the entire person, right? We need people to have the equanimity that you get from losing the game by 50 points, right? You need people to have the determination that you have to bolster up by hitting the game-winning shot. You need people to have the self-awareness and awareness of your community that a great running back or a great point guard has when he knows what's going on all around him and behind him at the same time. Right? Those things are important because once again, our society, we're able to save ourselves, but we got to stand up and realize that we have all the tools that we need. We just got to go grab them.
For sure, for sure. And I think that, it's I can relate and I can understand because I myself have been in situations where I've been detained unlawfully, and wrongly, and I know what that anger feels like. I know what that rage inside of you feels like. But I also, coming from a law enforcement family, I understand that one bad police officer or a group of bad police officers isn't representative of all of law enforcement. And you know, for somebody in the position that you're in, and I recently I read the articles, I saw the interviews. You were walking out of you were shopping and you were observing social distancing as it was directed to you, as it was directed to all citizens, of the United States. CDC recommended face coverings, gloves, 6 feet, social distancing, and by doing what you were asked to do, you were detained because you were viewed as a threat. If somebody who's been elected to serve the people of their community is still viewed as a threat because he's a large black man, how do I, as a father, explain to my sons that if you do everything the right way, if you do what you're supposed to do, there's still a chance that things might not work out for you? Like, how do we have that conversation? And let's go one step beyond my sons, because there's coaches all around the country that are trying to figure out how to connect with their student athletes. And this is the worst time for this to be happening. And when I say that, I'm not, no disrespect to anything else that's going on in the world. But this is the worst time for this to be happening when we're distanced from our young men. We're not able to pull them close to us, put our arms around them and say, hey man, this is the situation. This is what it's going to be like. So how do we virtually, through the phone, text, whatever, how do we have that conversation to help them to understand that you can do everything the right way and still be viewed as wrong just because of the shade of your skin? And how do we teach them we don't want them to ever accept it, but to understand it and to be able to not give anybody a reason for them to become the next hashtag?
Yeah, what you just said was extremely important. It's that balance, right? It's giving them the awareness that it exists, but not accepting it, not letting them think that it's okay, right? It's funny because I thought a bunch about my situation and a lot of the things that's going on with other folks in the recent weeks, and it's not okay that anybody has to suffer that just be based on the color of their skin, right? Your skin color is suspicious, but it's our reality. And as I often go back in my head and try to connect life lessons to sport lessons, I remember my junior year in high school, we were playing in the state playoffs. I think it was the second round at a school downstate, and what I know and maybe some of your viewers know, is that public league schools in Chicago don't usually make it to the state playoffs, and only one has ever won the state championship. There's a bunch of reasons why. Some of them are socioeconomic, and that's a whole separate episode to itself. Is what it is, but we were poised to do it. We had an amazing team, and we realized that we were going to play in a place that was not necessarily friendly. People look like us, playing with referees who knew the guys on the other team, and just playing in a very racially hostile environment. And before we took the field, we had our entire game plan with this amazing offense, and Coach Burlock said, you guys need to know that in order to score in order to get 6 touchdowns, you got to score 8. Right? And what he was telling us was that they were going to pull stuff back away from us just because we were who we were. And while that did not sit well with us, knowing the rules before we went in, we were able to I think internalize that and then move accordingly. Unfortunately, that's the same way for many of our young men.
Lost your audio, Cam. Lost your audio.
How about that?
Yep, got you now.
What's the last thing you heard me say?
The knowing the rules as you guys went in.
Yeah, and I think knowing the rules as we went in was important because we were able to internalize that and have it in the front of our minds, and then therefore act accordingly, and operate accordingly. I think with our young men, we've got to do the same thing. We got to let them know, listen, this is the history of this country. This is how we got here. This is where we've been. This is where we are now. And in order to keep yourself safe, you need to know these things. And then after that, this is what we require of you. This is how you do your part to fix it, to get us from here to here. So I think it's a very tough conversation. I don't envy, black men who have young boys, especially when you have this conversation. But it's something that we have to have. We got to be honest with.
Lost your audio again.
Now,
Gotcha.
this is ghetto internet, brother. I don't know what's going on.
Hey, Namika Bates gave you that computer.
Lord Jesus, Namika. Don't get me started. What's the last thing I said?
No, just them understanding how we need them to act in order to, for example, Martin carried the baton so far, and he handed it off. Brock carried it so far, and he's handed it off. You're going to carry it so far. I'm going to carry it so far. We're going to hand it off. We need that next generation ready to take that baton and go further than we ever could have imagined going. And you're just preparing them for that moment, preparing them for how to act and how to navigate through the world that we live in.
And that's real. I think you perfectly painted that picture. We all have a role to play. We have to take what was given to us and build upon that. I know it's cliche, and everybody talks about leaving the world a better place than you found it. That's important. At the end of the day, is being able. Your legacy has to be that you did something to move us forward, and that you inspired somebody who came after you to do the same thing.
For sure. And what I want to say, we've touched a lot on the state of the state of our communities, and I'd be remiss if we didn't spend time talking about that with everything going on and impacting not only our student athletes, but impacting coaches, their fathers, their brothers, their sons. There's so many different people affected by it. But the thing that I want to focus on and I want to touch on and close with is, I see you as a beacon of hope, for many different reasons. But, a couple things you said earlier, you talked about, not being the best student because you weren't always engaged and challenged, not really knowing exactly what it is you wanted to do, but knowing that you wanted to change the world, you wanted to help people, and taking all of that and utilizing your athletic ability as a vehicle to earn your education to open those doors. I see you as a beacon of hope for young black men that come from areas like the South Side of Chicago, to knowing that there's more to it than professional athletics or rapping or selling drugs or right? Like you touched on not knowing any lawyers growing up, right? I think that your story is one where they can relate because we're still close enough in age for them to understand versus, sometimes we look at our parents' generation and we're like, man, yeah, okay, yeah, that's how it was back in the day, but that doesn't really correlate to right now. But I'm just proud of you, man, the fact that, you utilized your athletic ability to earn your education. You became a lawyer. You did achieve your original goal of being a teacher. You're a college professor. So inadvertently, a roundabout way of achieving that. You did teach.
At a school I couldn't get into if I tried. You'll see when I even look at my application if I try. But thank God for favor, man.
Right, and that's the thing, man. It's like, we've been blessed and we've received. You touched on it. You said it best, favor. And I think that the message that I want anybody seeing this to take away is that there are no limitations on what you can be. I mean, if somebody would have told you at 13 years old, hey, you're going to be a state representative representing the South Side of Chicago, representing the place that you're from, representing Brownstown. I mean, would you have even taken that serious? Would you have believed it?
Probably not, man. Probably not. And that's why I think it's so important and incumbent upon us to be able to help young folks, young men and women, look at what's possible and figure out what their dream is, right? My journey may not be like yours, but if there's anything that happened with me along the way that I can give you to impart some wisdom or knowledge or some understanding on you, like let's do that, because we all play a part in the grander scheme of this. And the more we talk, the more we connect, the more that we bounce ideas off of each other, and the more that we actually support each other in a real way, not just the kind of the top level support, the grass tops, but the grassroots, like deep into partnership and building with each other. The better off we'll all be.
For sure, for sure. And let's close on this. I want you to think back on growing up in Southside Chicago. And I want you to think back to 13, 14, 15-year-old Kam, because those are the people that ultimately I want to see this and learn from this and grow from this. Is the representative of who we were at that phase of our lives, at that stage of our lives. If you're thinking back to that 13-year-old Kam, what would you tell him if you're looking at him right now, if he's on the other end of this Zoom, still trying to figure out what this life looks like, still trying to figure out what it is that he can do or bring or impart on this world? What's that one piece of advice that you give 13-year-old Kam?
Wow, that's a huge one. I think what I would tell him, and I got this later on in life, but I think what I would tell him is that he definitely has a place in our society, that he doesn't have to be a backbencher, a backseater, or marginalized. But with that place comes responsibility. And the responsibility is incumbent upon him to have a vision, to be a voice, and to make a difference every single day of his life.
Man, that's dope. And I think that, man, wow. I think we all need to hear that, right? I think the 35-year-old me needs to hear sometimes that I have a place. And I think that, we don't do that enough. I actually, I was listening, Joel Osteen was talking last night about, the message that we tell ourselves. And that if we don't believe it, and if we're not, we're self-sabotaging ourselves with a lot of the things that we say, or we say we can't do something, or we're not able to do something, versus planting our own seed, like you said, putting our mask on first. So, man, there's so many gems within this that I think a student athlete, or anybody, it doesn't necessarily even have to be a student athlete, will walk away, and not only will they know more about you, but they'll also walk away and they'll hopefully know more about themselves and know more about how to grow into being the best version of themselves. So I thank you. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day. I can't thank you enough for your words of wisdom. I can't thank you enough for being open and sharing your story and your journey. And the journey's not done yet. I know it. I have some thoughts, and I'll keep them to myself, but I have some thoughts of where I think that we'll see you in the years to come. And I'm proud of you, man. I'm proud of you. I love you. I appreciate you. You're championing all the things that I love and believe in. So you always have my support. Anything I can do for you, I'm here, brother.
Thank you, brother, man. Thank you for everything you're doing. I love you and appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to what's next. And gratitude.
Amen. Amen.